Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our next installment of our Emergency Management webinar series. Thank you for joining us this morning for our 10 Steps for Better Disaster Preparedness with ArcGIS Online. With me this morning, I have John Petter from our disaster response team. He'll be helping to answer some of the questions during the course of the webcast. So feel free at any time to put in questions inside the questions panel, and John and I will try and answer as many of those as possible during the course of the webinar. So here's the agenda for today. Well, as always, we'll talk quickly about the purpose of this webinar series. Then we'll get into the exact 10 steps that we have prepared to discuss with you today. Finally, as part of our normal business, we'll give a quick update on ArcGIS for emergency management and some of those solution templates, as well as a disaster response program update. Since we just finished and got home from the user conference and National Security and Public Safety Summit, we wanted to give a quick recap of some of those events and then finally get into some next steps. So the purpose of these webinars is to provide a continuous update on how you can use the ArcGIS platform to help support emergency management and disaster response activities. This comes from our public safety team, and many different members of the team participate in these webcasts. We've stuck to our schedule pretty strongly over the past year, and these are the first Thursday of every month. Next month, on August 4th, will be an introduction to drone to map for emergency management. Many of you may have seen the exciting possibilities of drone to map presented at the user conference in San Diego last week, and we'll get into more details on this exciting new set of capabilities next month. If you have any additional suggestions for future topics that we should consider, please let us know. Send us an email, where we definitely want to be responsive to the needs and ideas of the user community. So in today's topic, 10 steps for better preparedness with ArcGIS Online. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of take a moment and kind of step back. Over the course of the years of supporting users in times of need and disasters, we often hear that after a disaster, the response community really then start to understood the power of GIS and what it can provide for emergency response. And really what we want to do is we want to kind of help you think about ways to get better prepared for using the technology, using these great new set of capabilities before the disaster happens. This is one of my obviously a horrific event, tornadoes that struck Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 2011, but an inspirational picture here, and one of my favorites from Karen Tureen at GeoJobe, who helped us out with that event. And I like to think that GIS helped support this event. I remember that they were looking for specific information on where there was basements and that help define their search priorities for search and rescue efforts after the tornadoes. So again, just thinking about and reminding us all really the purpose of what this is all for in terms of helping folks in times of need and really leveraging the power of GIS. And we've seen that employed time and time again through the course of many disasters. So with that, we'll start to get into our 10 steps through the course of what we wanted to present this morning. And really we wanted to present these kind of from the unique perspective of coming from our disaster response team. Many members of our team kind of contributed to the ideas and the suggestions in these topics, and these basically build on top of a basic level of knowledge of using the platform, leveraging ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS, and web maps and the apps that kind of come along with that. And there's many opportunities to learn more about those things, but we wanted to get started and talk about 10 steps from our perspective on better preparedness. So step number 1 here in our program is have feature services ready to go. Basically, what are the elements the operational elements that you'd want to collect over the course of an incident and be able to convey in a map form? Simple things like incident details, or shelter location and status, or road closures, other operational elements like where's the command post, that type of thing. Even special events can be considered here, as well as damage damage assessment. So what are those sets of operational layers that you want to have access to, you want to have wired and ready to go with inside your organization, before disaster strikes? To help you with this, our Solutions Division team has prepared a service catalog of all the feature services that they provide in their templates. And this provides a great place to get started from, to start to hydrate and populate your org with the set of feature services that you'd need to be ready to go to capture and document information as the disaster or incident unfolds. Just a couple of other notes here, from a symbology perspective. This symbol is actually maybe another way to think about, basically the data model or the schema of the types of information that you want to, collect. At some level, I almost like to think of this, as what's that, box of Crayola crayons that you want to mark up the map with, and these, essentially represent the different colors, or the box of Sharpies, and, the symbology can actually be really a strong driver for capturing the types of data that you'd want to show on the map. So just wanted to highlight a couple of other resources here, and note that our Solutions Division has a rich symbology repository, and you can download the symbols for mobile or web or desktop in either PNG or style files that you can configure with inside ArcMap. Also wanted to note that that NABSIC also has been doing a lot of work recently on updated symbology, and that's another great potential resource for you. They've gone into other areas like resources and that type of thing. So it's another great collection of symbols to explore as you start to build up your feature service repository to be able to communicate information during disasters. And then finally, just wanted to give a nod from the international perspective as well, and note that our friends at Map Action have taken the UN OCHA set of symbols and provided a set of style files for those as well. So these are other things that you can download, and some of these actually have been turned into symbols with inside ArcGIS Online. But again, just in our first step here, be prepared with feature services. I not only wanted to highlight some of the existing, feature service templates that you can leverage, but also the rich set of symbology, both from Esri and the user community, that you can use to start to be prepared for when a disaster strikes. The next step here is to have your incident web maps ready to go. Basically, have the feature services that you created in that first step, and have those loaded into a generic, incident map template that's ready to go and ready to mark up, as you see here, when the disaster strikes. This is something that you don't want to have to go and spin up when disaster strikes. You can basically get going with it, straight away. And these are good things to have prepared and built inside your organization before disaster happens. Obviously, furthermore, web maps end up driving a lot of the apps that come with the ArcGIS platform, so it's even more reason to have those web maps prepared with the feature services loaded, so your users can start to mark up the details of the incident and the response, as it unfolds using the existing technology. So that's step 2 in the process, basically having the web maps ready to go and prepared with inside your organization. Step 3 here is to create information products, and the real point here is to start to have conversations with your directors, your operations folks, on what are the types of information that they need when disaster happens. There's 4 kind of key apps that we see that are really valuable for when disaster strikes, and this just kind of gives you a sense of some of the types of things that you can get started with. So the operations dashboard, for example, for situation awareness, perhaps in the as an example in the upper right there from CalOS, something that you'd have up in your command center, visible at all times, to display current information, not only in map form but in report form with charts and widgets and that type of thing. So we find that very valuable for folks. Or using the story map journal for briefing purposes. We've got an example here from the Ecuador earthquake, and being able to flip through the different pages, if you will, of the story map journal to give details details of how the disaster, unfolds. Collector has been really helpful from a field mobility perspective, doing things like, damage assessment, or just doing some windshield surveys, or restaurant inspections, or just really simple status or note things can be conducted, and you can use a collector to leverage that, really quickly. And we've seen many users get value out of leveraging collector in their operations. And we've had past webinars on those three information products, specifically. And then finally, on kind of an up and coming one is the web app builder, and this provides great utility for configuring very focused applications, mission focused applications with this specific set of data and tools that are needed to do a specific task. Perhaps these are even focused in different functional areas like shelter management or ESF6, for example. And there's a set of solution templates there that kind of go along with that. But really, these information products are really important to have put together beforehand, have your operations staff ready to use these and trained in these, and really a chance to have conversation with folks on some of the types of information that they need. Obviously, there's a lot that you can do for emergency management with ArcGIS, and there's over 30 solution templates for emergency management that we have at our solutions site, and that number is growing all the time with new releases and adding to this number. There's also a wide variety of potential information products. We've internally documented over 100 potential information products for emergency management. Taking examples from you, the user community, and the rich type of applications that you can put together and configure across the board. But we've kind of boiled up a lot of this information here to those couple to start with. And really the point of all this is to empower your organization with information products. What do they need to do their job? And what can you put on them to kind of get out of the way of communicating information? Oftentimes GIS specialists get a piece of paper like this with a set of coordinates or addresses and get asked to make a map. And these are tasks now that more people in the organization can do. Or sometimes, saddled with the stack of papers and asked to make a map of all this information. And these manual tasks, this manual labor, can take away from other important, duties that, or other analytic tasks that may be needed inside, the organization. Or sometimes even people come up with, paper maps that have been marked up with, road closures or that type of thing. Really, the thing to think about from an information product perspective is how can you essentially deputize more GIS staff within your organization to help collect, manage, and maintain this type of information, and prepare simple apps for them to keep the status of things up to date and edit this very quickly. Perhaps as the GIS staff can focus more on some of the QA, QC tasks rather than the complete kind of data entry. So just kind of wanted to leave you there with some thoughts from an information product perspective and the types of things that you can do and should start to do to help empower your organization with all the capabilities provided by the ArcGIS platform. Extra credit for developing the standard operating procedures or the user guides to go along with these information products. So something to be thinking about to grow into leveraging some of the additional capabilities provided by the platform. Step 4 in our 10 steps here is to be ready to share maps and apps with groups. Groups are a great way inside ArcGIS Online to organize and share information. And we find that the easiest place to start is just simply to create a single incident group, Colorado flooding, for example, and use that to start to organize some of the specific, information products that are available for that, specific, incident. Over time, you can grow and mature the use of groups in other areas, such as emergency support functions or incident command system functions or aspects, as well as common business units during blue sky days or blue sky operations. But don't overwhelm your user community to start with. Simply focus on a single incident group that you can have a membership in, and oftentimes we find this is a great way to get started from a group perspective. Another kind of key capability that we wanted to highlight with groups is groups are actually a great way to securely share information both inside your organization and with other organizations. So the idea here is essentially the whole response community, even if they're members of different ArcGIS Online for organizations accounts, can have common membership in a single or set of groups. And this was demonstrated during the Capstone 2014 exercise, where 8 states and FEMA and other private organizations were able to securely share information in a common group. And we'll show how to set this up here in a few minutes. But I think this is really kind of a key capability and a key takeaway for some of the power of using ArcGIS Online to share information, during disasters and even beforehand. So I challenge each of you to think about how you might be able to leverage this type of sharing capability in your state, in your region, to help be better prepared to share information for when disaster strikes. A great, leader here is Cal OES, and I like how they've really encouraging membership across the state of California between the counties and municipalities to all share information in a common, set of groups. So I think this is a great, example to think about in terms of one organization, taking the lead and being the parent group to share information, and then have many organizations or municipalities within the area share information. So this is really helpful for things like road closures, which is oftentimes difficult to get a complete picture of during flooding or other types of disasters, because a lot of different information can be managed in different places, but you can allow it to roll up into a common group to give broader access for a regional situation awareness picture. So just kind of one example here to think about moving forward to how to leverage the technology. Step 5 is really to get into the data flow of the incident. How can you get visibility into some of the data sources that are valuable to give information on the current extent of the disaster, what is being done to help respond to this particular event, that type of thing. So often where we start from the Esri Disaster Response Program side are these data sources that are listed here. These are kind of our go-to first set of resources that we'll look to find information on a current disaster. FEMA and their use of the Geo platform and is oftentimes has web maps and apps and story map journals sometimes of specific incidents, and a lot of times you can find a lot of great information for disasters within inside that org. The USGS and their HDDDS, or Hazard Data Distribution System, provides access to a lot of imagery and other post-event data. Our friend Glenn Bethel helps index and provides an email alias with a lot of details on data sources for different disaster types, and is a great resource to help share information. NIFC, the National Interagency Fire Center, has their own org and is doing a lot of work to manage information for wildfires there. And then finally, from an international perspective, UNISAT in Geneva helps provide data and detailed analysis, the results of remote sensing interpretation for different disasters around the globe, and is another kind of great data source at a kind of international or global level. Obviously, there's a lot of information at the local level as well, and oftentimes this you have to rely on the regional network to be able to find this information, the GIS grapevine, if you will, and a lot of municipalities and within their side, their public works or Department of Transportations or Parks and Rec department may have a lot of good information to tap into. Oftentimes private entities will provide imagery or other sources of information on status of electrical outages or power outages or that type of thing. So it's another sources of information to look to, and obviously in a perfect world that would be organized, at least from our perspective, in a set of groups where this information would just flow and it wouldn't be as hard to go out and find this information. But in thinking about being better prepared, these are entities that are part of the network and the response community as well, and important to tie into. Also, up and coming, we've seen more and more use of ArcGIS open data to not only share but to get data for disasters. Recent, implementation examples here from the recent Highfield Open Data site, which includes some of the old HSIP Freedom data and more, now available to freely, download in many different categories as you see here. So that's a great resource of information. Something that we heard last week about at the user conference plenary, the Los Angeles GeoJobe, and sharing a lot of great data there. Even at more of a local level, a recent example from Boulder County here in Colorado. So again, the open data tools are sit on top of ArcGIS Online and are pretty easy to set up and extend the capabilities of the platform to share data in this mechanism. So another set of capabilities for you to consider from a preparedness perspective. Step 6, we wanted to talk about either establishing or building good governance. And obviously there's a lot to this from an IT perspective and a broad range of things to consider from a risk management and many different aspects from governance. But really, there's a couple of specific things that we wanted to focus on from a disaster response, perspective. And part of it is, so what are some of the elements of good governance? And part of it's being organized around a single set of goals or objectives, right? What are you trying to achieve with your information sharing environment? You're probably trying to get to provide situational awareness across the region and across many different, groups and share information to help respond, more effectively. Help build your constituency and set of stakeholders that can participate with you, and also educate the public as well. From a tactical perspective, there's a couple of other things to kind of consider, and this is a little bit more down in the details from a GIS perspective, and thinking about properly filling out some of the item details with inside your ArcGIS Online items. As the old phrase goes, don't duck metadata, and this is really some elements of that. Things like a title that's brief and descriptive and make sense for non-GIS users. Having a good thumbnail that gives a sense of what the details are. A description gives you a chance to provide a lot more details about the specific item, and perhaps provide hyperlinks or images to other sources. Other properties are important, and we find tagging, and a good tagging scheme is important to help enable information sharing. And there's a couple of different elements from a tag perspective to think about in terms of being better prepared. One aspect is, what's the common tag for the incident? Is it something along the lines of the Twitter hashtag? Is it the incident ID used by some organizations like FEMA or the Red Cross that are need to be added in there? So think about what the common incident name will be and use more broadly throughout the response. So think about that. Also, the jurisdiction is important. Who's the source provider, and especially as you're searching for data across many different areas. Is it from the county, the city, the state, that type of thing. Also think about things from the emergency management workflows, right? So what are the emergency support function perhaps that these information products relate to? ESF1 transportation, ESF6 mass care, that type of thing. Perhaps both in numbers and then also in domain or function form, essentially the human readable terms like transportation or debris removal, that type of thing. So these are all great elements to think about from a governance perspective that are good to do beforehand to really help enforce and ensure best practices for sharing information. Step 7 here in our list is to read Bernie's blog. Bernie Zakowski is the product manager on the ArcGIS Online team and one of our main technology evangelists, and he's got a great blog and blogs frequently on updated best practices for ArcGIS Online. And there's a couple that I'd like to highlight specifically here on this morning's webcast. The first one is to talk about creating a good profile. this really helps people determine if the information is authoritative or not. If they look at the item details and look to see who provided this information, if there's no picture, if there's no description, it doesn't give folks as much confidence in the item details. Also, the item details are important to provide contact information if folks have more questions, if want to get a hold of you in terms of getting more details about the specific item. Also, the second point here is extremely important for the group sharing perspective. Your profile must be public to enable that federated information sharing through groups. So if there's a common set of, if there's a single group that's set up and you want to add people from multiple organizations, their profiles must be public in order to add them to that group. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that here. That's a really kind of important step. That's an important setting inside the details here to be able to provide that information. So just kind of following some of Bernie's best practices here. Make sure your accounts are public and well documented. Additionally, there's some good guidance on creating good thumbnails. There's many different styles or ways that you can create thumbnails to represent what your content looks like. And this blog post is still a classic in terms of different ideas and schemes and methodologies for creating a good-looking thumbnail. So I encourage you to read this. Additionally, just wanted to note that there's a set of thumbnail templates included inside the ArcGIS Online for Emergency Management template. We sometimes call this the model org, and as you can see here, there's a spot for the agency logo in the bottom left, some indicator or flag of the sharing level at the upper right, either all, org, or group. Along the left-hand side, it gives us a sense of what the type of item is, whether that's an application or a web map or an ops dashboard, and then finally the title at the bottom. So just and this is done through a PowerPoint template, so it's really easy to save out these images and then add these to your item details. So just another resource for you to help brand the content for you here inside the view. And note, I know we've been sharing a lot of links and information through the course of this PowerPoint presentation. We'll send out a post-event email with a lot of the links that we've provided here. We've also been tweeting out today using the Esri EM hashtag with some of the links to this information. Step 8 here in our 10-step program is to be ready to add users in bulk. Time and time again we've seen many new or additional staff arrive and descend upon the command center or the command post when disaster strikes, and we find that our online administrators need to add users in bulk. And there's a quick and easy way to do that through a file. So just through the normal process here, you get started to invite members with pre-established usernames, and then instead of doing these one at a time, you can now do these as a file and upload a set of users in bulk from a file if you use these 5 common fields: the email, first name, last name, username that you want to establish with inside the org, and the role. So this is a quick way in bulk to add a lot of new users to your organization. So this is something that we encourage you to take a look at, to get familiar and comfortable with this workflow, so that when disaster happens, you're able and ready to add a lot of users here in bulk to your org to help out with the response. Step 9, this is something that the team has really got a lot of value out of, the GeoJobe admin tools. There's a free version of this on the marketplace, and we've got the link here that we'll provide, and it's got a lot of great administrative utilities for us to help us be more efficient in some of our administrative tasks, such as adding users to groups. If you want to add a bunch of new users to or existing users to a new incident group, there's a quick way to do that. It's also got capabilities to export users to a file if you need to double check the email list or do reports, that type of thing, look at usage. You have the capability to export the users and some of their details to a file for further analysis. The ability to update and add tags, we talked about that, how that's important from a governance perspective, and if perhaps there's a new incident tag that evolves through the course of the incident, you can update a set of items in bulk to leverage that new tagging scheme or information. Or for perhaps you need to want to send emails to all the folks in your org. It's got the utility to do that as well. And that's also pre-wired to hydrate the model orgs, like the emergency management model org, for example, inside your organization. The pro version of these tools has additional capabilities like the ability to clone items from org to org and much more. There's a lot of also great training videos that are available through the GeoJobe site, so definitely a good administrative tool that we found a lot of value in, that we think is something that's worth you all checking out and wanted to mention here. Okay, the last step in here in our 10 steps for better preparedness is exercise, exercise, exercise. As we kind of talked about in the beginning, we want to make sure that don't let your next disaster be the first time you and your organization leverage ArcGIS Online. We find that when that happens, that really can result in delays or confusion, and just with a little bit of training beforehand can go a long way to help you be more effective when and if disaster strikes. We've got some couple examples here in pictures. A regional wildfire exercise here in Colorado and Douglas County here just a couple of weeks ago. The Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium and their Capstone 2014 exercise that you may have heard us talk about or seen the video on, that was created a couple of years ago, really did a good job of exercising ArcGIS Online. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the state of Florida and their annual hurricane exercise, and I've really been impressed as I've watched them from year to year expand their use of the technology, leverage new capabilities and an exercise or consequence free environment, and really kind of build and grow from year to year. And these may be some examples of larger scale and more complex exercises, but just even quick, short, unannounced, 1 hour spontaneous exercises can be extremely valuable from a preparedness perspective. Especially from the kind of collector and field mobility perspective, I'd encourage you to think about getting folks out of the office to go out and use collector, even if it's just in the parking lot. Go through the workflows of finding your GPS location, practice streaming in and editing information. Look at leveraging things like Siri to help you collect information on smartphones or use photos. So in our experience, getting folks out of the office to actually stand up and go outside has been extremely helpful to get them better prepared for using the technology. And finally, most important, to apply the lessons learned from these exercises to your standard operating procedures. If you learn something, make sure to capture that and continue that on and be able to share that in your organization or your response community through the use of standard operating procedures. Also, just kind of wanted to note here that think about special events too in almost that same vein as exercises. Special events are an opportunity to shine with a lot of eyes on the technology and the capabilities. Decision makers, elected officials will have visibility into the power and value that GIS can provide to things like special events, which in many cases are just one away from being a disaster or an incident. And really, we see success here in special events will help the entire organization realize the potential. And folks like Henrico County and Henrico County Fire and their use of the technology through their series of NASCAR races that happen twice a year, we've really seen them grow and really be thought leaders now in the use of the technology. Same thing in the city of Boston, between the city of Boston and the state, really be able to leverage the technology to coordinate and collaborate for things like the Boston Marathon. And obviously, many times these events happen regularly every year or twice a year, and it's again a chance to grow and establish a cadence of support with some of these regularly occurring events. So that was kind of the quick tour from in slide form of our 10 steps for better preparedness with ArcGIS Online. I just wanted to note here that these 10 steps not only kind of come from the technical folks on our team, but also really kind of reflect a lot of the best practices and good procedures that we've learned from you and the user community. And so I think this also kind of represents what we've seen kind of across the board and kind of our summation on ways of leveraging the new technology, the ways of leveraging ArcGIS Online to be better prepared for the next disaster. So just to recap again, step one was to have those feature services ready to go and collect that information. Step two was to be prepared with the web maps that have those feature services added, even if they're blank and ready to go for use in step three, some of the information products that you can work to build or prepare beforehand to get ready for the disaster. Step four, we talked about the the need to share information in groups, both inside the organization and outside the organization, and talked about some of the capabilities there. Step five was talk about some of the data sources that that are out there and available, both some of the kind of globally or federally available data sources, as well as some ideas of what may be available locally. Step six, it was about governance and tagging and some documenting some best practices for more effectively communicating information. Step seven was to read Bernie's blog and keep up to date with new best practices there. Step eight was adding new users to the org in bulk, which will often happen when disaster strikes. Step nine was to gain more efficiencies for administrative tasks by leveraging the GeoJobe administrative tools. And step 10 was to exercise. And I just wanted to kind of highlight one additional item there is exercises are a great chance to have conversations with the emergency managers with the decision makers to help them understand the kind of capabilities, and I've seen those conversations be really fruitful to help understandings on both not only the emergency manager or operations folks side to help them understand what the power of GIS can provide to them, but also on the GIS staff side as well. And that conversation will result in a better understanding of the needs of the community and what decisions will need to be made with the information product. So this is a great chance to really facilitate that communication environment to help folks kind of better understand the technology and the tools and what it can do for them to be better prepared. So now I wanted to take a look and show you a couple of these items here just really quickly, and some of the things that you can do. So going back to what we talked about in the first step was have those feature services ready to go. So what I wanted to highlight here is how you would get going with this information. So here, if I've got publisher capabilities, I can create a new feature layer. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. I can do that from some of the predefined templates that are available. We can see the collection of items here. Note here that damage assessment is one of the predefined templates within inside ArcGIS Online for creating a new feature service. But as we talked about a few minutes ago, our solutions division folks provide a service catalog, and essentially is a menu of ready-to-go services that you can essentially copy and stand up with inside your organization. So if I look at one of these specifically, such as emergency shelters, and then grab the service URL for that existing public feature service, I can go here and create a new feature layer within inside my org, based on the symbology and the schema that has been defined. Obviously, you can modify this, customize this as you see fit. But just wanted to highlight here, just here with a couple of steps, we can create a new feature service within inside our org. Fill out a couple of details here. And then here now with just a few clicks, I can go ahead and get started with creating this feature service with inside our org. So what this will have is essentially it will provide the data container now that will allow us to update and add new information. So I'll go ahead now that I've created this new feature service and add this to the map. And in just a sec here, you'll note that there's been a predefined set of symbols that are already established. So it's used the status field within inside the feature service to mark the symbology here, and kind of red, green, yellow type of thing. Mark what the status of the shelters are, and I'm off and running. Obviously, in this case, there's no content inside here, but it's ready to go. So now that I've essentially done that first step that we've talked about, the second step was to have the web map kind of created and ready to go. So we'll call this, in this case, our shelters map. Add some tags. And now, this is just, kind of a quick example of having that shelters map, ready to go. So this may be, empty. It's not, populated at this time, but we'll have this information, ready for when we need to go in and edit, new data. So I'll go ahead and save it, to this extent, and then just kind of note here that now, if we needed to, we can go in and add in more, details of any kind of particular, item and leverage, some of the, schemas that have already been set up and defined, inside here. And now, just an example of starting to edit the data once we've got that, in place and you're kind of off and running. So again, you can create new feature services either from an existing template at a service URL or another existing service within inside your organization. So just wanted to give you a quick sense of how easy that is to do and get started with. Also, wanted to kind of talk about groups for a few minutes and how you can use those and set those up. So here is our public disaster response organization site, and within inside here there's a couple of key groups that several of you have become members of. So we have a documents group inside here where we've created a set of how-to user guides for common information products. This is public and something that you can leverage or get going with, and you can ask to join this group and get added to it. And so we encourage all of you, if you'd like to join this group or perhaps one of our examples groups. So let's think about and kind of step through the workflow of how to create a new incident group, and how you might add in additional membership here. So I'll simply now that I'm inside the org, I'll say click on create group here. Maybe I want to, in this example, want to create an incident group for the recent Texas flooding. I'll browse to an icon that I'll use in the group and note it's it's got to be square, so about 65 by 65 pixels. Put in a quick summary here. Group to share maps and apps related to the Texas flooding. Entering in kind of more kind of descriptive details, as needed. In this case, we'll kind of go through our, kind of some tagging that we'll want to apply here. So for now, we'll use the incident tag of Texas flooding. If there's some, incident ID, we can certainly add that to this as well. We'll put in something to comment on the jurisdiction. In this case, it's very kind of generic, and so we can put it at this level. Then there's a couple of other things to consider here when creating this incident group, and that's the visibility of this. Is it private, so no one in your org can find it? Is it only at the organization level, or is it at a public level where other folks can search and find this group? And this may be key if you're looking to have this group, serve multiple organizations. and have several folks, be able to find that and essentially be a place to share information across in amongst a group of different response, organizations. So a couple of other things here will say, users can apply to join this group. We'll say that any of the members of the group can contribute the data, and then we'll just kind of go with all those steps. So now, very quickly now we've got our incident group set up where we can use this to start to share information, into the org. Now, next we'll go through the steps of looking at how to invite users. So as you may or may not have seen, you can simply search for users that are inside your org to add them to a group. But if I uncheck this checkbox, I can search for any public profile that's out there and available and add any users. So in this case, I'll find some of my colleague John Petter's accounts and simply add them here to the group. So this is the way that you can add folks from multiple organizations to a single group to facilitate that information sharing. Perhaps the Emergency Management Agency, Public Works, Department of Transportation, any of the folks inside the response community that have information to contribute, we can have common membership in those groups using this kind of functionality. So I think this is kind of one of the main kind of key takeaways that we wanted to have you kind of think about in this presentation today is leveraging some of these group sharing capabilities for federated information sharing. So in the interest of time, those are just the couple of things that I wanted to highlight from in demo form from the 10 steps perspective. As we normally do, we're going to switch gears here for a minute and just provide a couple of updates and a couple of other areas. The ArcGIS for Emergency Management set of solution templates had a major update in the June release. A lot of new updates and additions were made that you should check out and look at. One of the big ones, it was a new set of community events templates, recasting some of the special events templates to even go further back in the process when people actually apply or have permits reviewed. So there's a new set of templates there to take a look at. Additionally, a lot more work from the mitigation perspective, not only looking at mitigation projects and status and inventorying those, as well as doing some vulnerability analysis using ArcGIS Pro. A couple of notes of some of the status of existing templates. My hazard info, that template's been moving to mature support, and there's a new web app widget to use for that particular template. And the briefing book, standalone application has now been moved to more mature support, for example, and really been taken over by things like the story map journal. So a couple of other notes here from the solution template update side. Also, we have, as I mentioned a minute ago, we've got an examples group on our disaster response program site where we inventory, examples from the user community and the Esri disaster response team on good and best practices. And just a couple of things to note this month. The recent flooding in Paris resulted in a couple of information products, and so you can take a look at those particular examples in French, but you'll get a sense of the use of the technology from an international perspective. Also, New South Wales and Australia put together a tsunami evacuation areas map to help raise awareness and communicate info with the public. And then, obviously, with the concerns of mosquitoes, there's and Zika, and in fact here in the West Nile virus surveillance example using the story map journal from the city of Grapevine, Texas. So those are three new examples that have been added to this group over the past month that are worth checking out and exploring kind of the extended use of the technology in that way. Also, just really quickly wanted to note that our disaster response program homepage and request system have been recently updated over the past month, thanks to the hard work of Brenda Martinez and the team. So, note here that if you go to www.esri.com/disaster, it's got a new look, and that request assistance orange button, one of the key things you'll probably be looking for is front and center on the app. And on the main page, different articles of recent uses or links to GIS resources like our org site, or point out our social media Twitter account and Facebook page, or feeds are linked there. There's also pages for different, disaster types with standing, public information map examples with live data and other user examples along, different disaster types such as severe weather or earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfire, flooding, or even humanitarian, response. So new examples there to explore. One of the key things is if help is needed, if you need help, the request form is new. So a couple of key items here when submitting a request, make sure to fill out the contact details so we know how to get a hold of you, especially if you're forward deployed or hard to get a hold of. Give us your cell phone number so we can get in touch with you. If you can, pick the disaster type and location. Pick what the support type is needed, and common things that we get asked for, GIS software, either desktop or ArcGIS Online, users or account, or technical support, including premium tech support or data and imagery. So it's just important to help give us details and specify what's needed as much as possible in these areas. And then finally, any additional notes or messages or instructions or justification if needed when submitting a request. The last main topic before we'll get into questions that we wanted to cover is just give a few minutes and talk about and provide some resources and details of the recent user conference and National Security and Public Safety Summit that happened this last week. Obviously that was just last week, and some of the information is still being processed, so a lot of the proceedings, the technical workshops, the national security presentations will be posted shortly at the proceedings site. The videos from the user conference plenary are available now. Great examples from Los Angeles, great demonstrations of the use of the technology. Some of the new technology, including drone to map, was showcased, and you can go watch that specific section. Also, a lot of the photos have been posted on Flickr, and you can explore those as well. A couple of notes from our side, from the public safety team. We had the Ops Center presentations for fire, emergency management, law enforcement, and national security that were well attended. We got a lot of good feedback from you that attended, so we thank you for your attendance and your feedback on the presentations. It gave us good ideas for what we'll do next year to help grow that. One kind of fun thing that we did that I wanted to highlight is at the end of the week we had a special events workshop where we had about 50 participants work together with us, and we kept it fun. We had the scenario was a Star Wars parade surrounded as a part of the Comic-Con event, and broke the participants up into 4 groups to create key information products. And the operations dashboard situation awareness one was the most popular, with John in the upper left there. Workforce and collector were really also very valuable in the upper right, and public information map group in the bottom right, and finally our kind of command incident briefing using the story map journal at the bottom left was there. So in last year we used a zombie infestation scenario, and that was fun and valuable. This year we built on top of that with a special events theme and using Star Wars as the scenario. And so the participants that we talked to certainly got a lot out of this, got a lot out of actually getting their hands dirty and starting to leverage and use the technology. Some of the steps that we talked about during the course of this webinar were exercised. One final note, just a public service announcement that we've got some live feeds that will be retired at the end of the year and transition to ArcGIS Online. So if you're leveraging feeds from tmservices1.esri.com, make sure you update to use the ArcGIS Online version of those by the end of the year. And all the content will still be provided, it just will simply come from another source. So just make sure you continue to work on updating your sources of feeds by the end of the year. So that's it. That really concludes what we wanted to share and talk with you today. So we definitely encourage you to explore the resources that we shared and talked about in today's webinar. We'll be sending out an email here shortly, a follow-up email with a lot of the links that we provided and shared, so you can click through and explore some of those resources. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, August 4th, and we'll cover the new drone to map application and talk about some of its value and utility for emergency management. management. As always, please contact us with your questions, ideas, or suggestions for a future topic. Then I've provided both my email and John Petter's email here, who's been helping to answer some questions today, so thank you, John. Also note that we're on Twitter, these two handles, and have been using the Esri EM hashtag to also share out some resources and links through the course of today's presentation. And I know it may seem a little early, but please plan to join us in San Diego next year. The National Security and Public Safety Summit starts a year from tomorrow, and just go ahead and pencil that in on your calendar, and hopefully you can join us in San Diego for both the National Security and Public Safety Summit as well as the user conference the following week, but later next year on July 10th through the 14th. Of 2017 in San Diego. So with that, we'll maybe take a few minutes and answer any other questions that have kind of boiled to the top during the course of the webinar. I see that John has been asking many of these, and we can spend a few minutes here answering a couple of those. So let's see here. Let's take a look. A video recording of this presentation will be presented here and provided in a couple of days. You'll be able to watch it. We'll also be sending out an email link with a lot of the information and details that have been provided here and talked about during the course of this presentation. In terms of some of the training, questions, we do have one specific instructor-led class for public safety. It's kind of public safety workflows generically, and that's probably a good start. As was announced last week, all of the web courses are now going to be freely available to folks on maintenance. So there's a lot more live training materials that will be added, and I think those training teams will be looking at developing more with input from you. We did highlight a couple of key resources from the user community today, but those weren't exhaustive. So our apologies to any that we left out in these FEMA-based symbology or other groups. We simply just wanted to provide a set of examples based on what we've seen, but certainly there's more and out there. So.
Yeah, Jeff, one of the questions that came in was, I don't have enough users for an emergency. How can I quickly add users or purchase users? And this person was from a local government. As you had highlighted earlier, we have Esri's disaster response page, and you can go there and click on that orange button as Jeff walked through, and you can request for surge events training or an actual disaster event, additional users for your ArcGIS Online organization. So if you need to get people in the field to do damage assessment, that's something that we can help you with immediately to make sure that you're standing up the capabilities you need to manage that disaster event. And again, we'll do that with training. And if you have a public safety ELA, chat with your account manager about some of the surge models available there.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. So the disaster response program site is there to help you in times of need and give you those additional users that are needed for response, purposes, and that's available at no cost. So a lot of we can certainly help you out there to help you get through your disaster, and want to be there for you in times of need. Any other common questions, John, that you saw this morning?
Yes, a lot of questions seem to be best answered by our solutions template set. If you haven't been to those to that site, go to solutions.arcgis.com. Find all our solutions templates. There are various templates in there, anything from crowdsourcing through to the emergency management templates, special event and community event templates, and a lot of the questions that I got can be answered through just sort of coming through some of those templates and taking a look to see what we've already created as a good starting point. It might not be everything you need, but if it gets you 80% of the way there, it'll really start you off on the right foot. Question just came in: is Survey 123 really enough for emergency operations? Yes, Survey 123 is out of beta. It's potentially going to be used by several large agencies for doing damage assessments. There are some schemas being worked on which Esri will help publicize in the next week or so, and it's something that can be deployed very quickly and easily. One of the big things on Survey 123 is it's offline capable out of the box, so you don't need to download or cache anything on the device. You can simply get people in the field to start collecting data.
Excellent. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, the last one just came in here about interface with WebEOC. Yes, Esri and Inomedics have been working closely together on an extension for WebEOC to be able to pass data through to ArcGIS Online or Portal, and we've actually had some good success seeing that in action. And you can enable a board in WebEOC, and then you can have that data pass through automatically into a feature service in either Online or Portal, and then that's now available through your web maps, apps, dashboards, etc.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, well, thank you everyone for your questions, and John, thanks for helping to answer those today. Well, we're at the end of our hour. We thank you for joining. We hope that you learned something new and learn from our experience and the experience of the user community, and can take away some concrete items to be better prepared for disasters using ArcGIS Online. Thank you everyone for joining, and please join us again next month for our next topic. Thank you and have a good day.